Greetings, I am Dee, and I bid you welcome to Samhain month. Halloween, the only holiday that is truly worth celebrating. And to celebrate this greatest time of the year, I've got a real treat for you. As I'll be counting down the weeks until the holiday, and while doing so, I'll be talking about nothing but the horror genre. And today, let's talk about secret organizations first. They've existed throughout the ages, and some of them still do. And for some reason, these organizations, while well-meaning, often scare the crap out of people. If you're scared of secret organizations, you are probably the reason why they were conceived in the first place. Now, the idea of these organizations existing, whatever their goal or reason, is so intriguing they've been the subject of many works of fiction. And to make them even more intriguing, not only is their existence a secret, most of the time anyway, but also their reason for their existence is a secret. Often with the excuse that humans aren't ready to know about them. Now, what if I told you that today's novel is about an organization that is not only formed to hunt vampires and other things that go bump in the night, but is formed by Van Helsing, Jonathan and Mina Harker, Dr. Seward, and pretty much all the characters from Dracula? You'd probably say they're ripping off Helsing. And it's not a very good one either, because if you tossed out every and all reference to Bram Stoker's novel, you'd essentially still have the same story. Oh well, that's marketing for you. Anyway, with all that said, let's take a look at Will Hill's debut novel, Department 19. Jamie Carpenter was watching TV. Jamie Carpenter? J. Carpenter. Oh, like the famous filmmaker, John Carpenter, I see. "Put your hands above your head!" one of the men shouted. "Do it now!" The world exploded into deafening noise, and Jamie clamped his hands over his ears and screamed as the submachine gun spat fire and shot his father dead. And he already lost me. Seriously, some men in battle armor, presumably with the titular Department 19, killed his father because of some crime he committed? Surely he wasn't framed or anything, right? Jamie Carpenter tasted the blood and dirt and swore into the wet mud of the playing field. A huge hand gripped his hair and pushed his face back into the dirt. A kid that's being bullied and yet becomes a hero. Haven't heard that before. Granted, nobody wants to see a bully become a hero. Or do we? You see, if we allow a bully to be a hero, he would end up in tons of helpless situations. The same sort of helpless situations he often put others into, making him realize the error of his ways. Of course, such a thing wouldn't happen in real life, but I guess that's the point with fiction. To see things happen that don't occur in reality. He spun around, heart pounding. Nothing. Jamie. He felt his right hand connect solidly with something. On the ground in front of him was a girl, about his own age, holding her nose. "You dick!" The girl sniffled from behind her hand. "What did you do that for?" "I'm sorry," he said. "Why did you creep up on me?" "I was just trying to scare you," she said sulkily. A random girl that tries to scare you. Surely, seeing as how he's been bullied in the past 2 years, he would know better than to trust her. Jamie looked at her. She was very, very pretty, dark hair, tumbling down her shoulders. One look at her pretty face, and he instantly forgets why he punched her in the first place. Once again, our hero! "I'm Larissa," Fear overwhelmed him. "You used my name," he said, taking a step backwards. "How did you know my name?" "It doesn't matter, Jamie," she said, and then her beautiful brown eyes turned a dark, terrible red. Could this possibly get any worse? "I can't do it." Jamie struggled to open his eyes. He was lying on the grass, the girl called Larissa sitting next to him. "Damn it, I just can't do it," she said, apparently to herself. "What's wrong with me?" I could get into why this doesn't work, but that requires a bit more reading first. He pushed through the pain and sprinted to his house and toward the front door. It was wide open. He ran into the hallway. "Mom!" he yelled. "Are you there, Mom?" No answer. He was beyond fear now. He was numb, so he just watched as the tall, thin man in the grey suit walked into the room and smiled at him with teeth like razor blades. The man bared his teeth and took a step towards Jamie, and then the front door exploded into sawdust and an enormous figure stepped into the living room. The creature in the grey suit smashed through the big window and accelerated into the sky. "Jamie Carpenter! My name is Frankenstein. I'm here to help you." A relative to Victor Frankenstein, right? Not the actual creature himself? Jamie drifted awake. He was moving, a loud car engine rumbling somewhere behind him. In the seat next to him was Frankenstein's monster. "It's not polite to stare," the monster said. "Who are you?" Jamie managed, his mind screaming warnings at him. "My name's Victor Frankenstein. I did introduce myself." "I thought Frankenstein was the creator, not a monster," he muttered. "Victor Frankenstein made me," he said. "And for a time I was a monster. But after Frankenstein died, I took his name to honor him." "But you hate your maker. Why would you do anything to honor him?" Jamie stared angrily at the bolts in the huge man's neck. Bolts? Oh right, because the creature from the Universal movies has them. But the creature from Mary Shelley's novel does not! Is he staying true to the novels or to what's popular? Professor Van Helsing? The old man awoke from his musings and regarded the stout, red-faced fellow who was standing before him. "That is correct," he replied. "Mr. Stoker, I presume?" "Yes, sir," the man replied. By allowing Bram Stoker to interact with his own characters, you're basically saying that Stoker wasn't creative enough to come up with the story himself, that he had to have been a witness of some kind, however directly or indirectly. But in so doing, you're not paying respect to Stoker, you're insulting him! "Victor," he said again, "can you explain to me why there's a civilian teenage boy inside the most classified building in the country?" "Admiral Seward," he said, from above their heads, "this is Jamie Carpenter. I pulled him out of his house as Alexandru Romanov was about to tear his throat, sir." "Jamie Carpenter?" he said. "Your name is Jamie Carpenter?" And here's why I said you can toss out every and all reference to Bram Stoker's novel. Because the main hero is not at all related to the characters from the novel, and the main villain is not Dracula. It's like the story was meant to be another version of Harry Potter involving vampires instead of wizards, and Dracula was just shoehorned in at the last second. Against the wishes of your great-grandfather, who is the man with whom the story really begins. His name was Henry Carpenter, and everything that has happened to your family for the last 120 years can be traced back to the fact that he worked for a truly great man, Professor Abraham Van Helsing. Jamie laughed. Van Helsing wasn't real. You're talking to Frankenstein's monster, who introduced you to a man named Seward after you've witnessed the existence of vampires, and yet you question the notion of Van Helsing being real? Professor Van Helsing was real. The Dracula story and all the people in it is real. It happened almost exactly as that lazy drunk Stoker wrote it down. A lazy drunk? Why not? After being called a hack writer in this one, and a liar in this one. Any more insults? The vampire seductresses who distract Harker from his escape plans are fictional, as is the Count's ability to turn into a bat, or a wolf, or anything else for that matter. What the hell is the matter with you people? It's not bad enough that you keep insulting Stoker, without whom you wouldn't have a story to write in the first place. But if you're not gonna stay true to the characters from the novel, why bother using them? He was a man once, the prince of a country named Wallachia, named Vlad Tepes. No! I've already said what I had to in one of my earlier reviews. I don't need to get into that yet again. If people choose not to heed my advice, it's their funeral. Literally, I hope. So, he began. What you're telling me is that my dad was a secret agent who fought vampires for a living. Not just vampires, answered the monster. Werewolves, mummies, zombies, any number of monsters. Werewolves? Come on, full moon, silver bullets, and all that stuff? Silver bullets are unnecessary, said Frankenstein. But the moon controls them, as it always has. If by always, you mean ever since the 1940s, when the Wolfman movies were made. Do your research! What's the organization called? I'll let Admiral Seward tell you that, he answered. I'm to take you to him now. He's going to have to wait. And why is that? Because I went to see the girl who tried to kill me yesterday. Ah, the perfect time to talk about Larissa again. As some of you might have deduced, Carpenter has fallen in love with a vampire. So a hunter falls for his prey. That's completely new, isn't it? Ah, who cares? Anyway, here it doesn't work. Because it's made clear from the very beginning that Larissa can't bring herself to kill anyone. As such, Carpenter has no reason to fear that she would bite him, and the department would be more lenient towards her than they would be with other vampires. And for those of you who may doubt that, they've employed Frankenstein's monster! What I'm basically trying to say is that Mr. Hill here is completely missing the point of a forbidden love. 2 years ago, your father betrayed us. There was an attack, and a number of men were killed. The attack was carried out by Alexandru, the same vampire who took your mother, who ordered Larissa to kill you. Your father gave him the information that allowed it to happen. Oh, I'm sure Carpenter Sr. wasn't framed for all this at all. Seriously now, this is basically the plot from The Prisoner of Azkaban. I'm pretty sure your intended audience would have figured this out. What is this place? He whispered. It's the Fallen Gallery, Morris replied. Morris? As in Quincy Morris? This is what happens when you write a Dracula story without reading the original novel first. You see, Quincy never married, so I seriously doubt he had any kids. And guess what? By the end of the book, he died. So how could he possibly have any living descendants? Fear shot through Jamie. "That can't be true," he said. "They can't bring Dracula back. Tell me they can't." The monster looked at Jamie. "It's theoretically possible," he said slowly. "With his remains and enough blood, it could be done." "Of course! Nobody ever thought of that. Don't you have any ideas of your own?" "The Minas pilots that day were John and George Harker," said Frankenstein. "Two descendants of arguably the most famous name in Blacklight's history." What about Van Helsing? I mean, you keep tossing around names like Harker, Seward, Morris. But apart from Abraham himself, you never mention Van Helsing. Why? Because we've seen it too many times before? Oh, now you decide to be original. Well, at the same time, you don't bother explaining why no living relative of Van Helsing is involved with this story. I'm beginning to think that you, calling Stoker a lazy drunk, is a mere product of your own projection. Acknowledgements. Any offense caused to fans, relatives, etc. is absolutely unintentional. Great! So everyone you've offended, be it the fans of both Dracula and Frankenstein, as well as the people who wrote the original novels, can now rest assured because it was all unintentional. Excuse me for one moment. That had to get out. Anyway, don't get me wrong on one thing. It's not an essentially bad story. I mean, it is fast-paced, has some nice twists. But the main problem is that it tried to shoehorn Dracula into the story. Mind you, Dracula, while mentioned on several occasions, doesn't even appear until literally the last page. So this book can pretty much be summed up as follows. This has to be interesting. In short, if Department 19 were its own story that bore little to no connection to any previously established story, be it Dracula or Frankenstein, this book would have been so much better. This way, you won't have to pretend you respect either the characters or their creators, while you clearly do not. This was D, and this is Samhain month.